"The man is dead," said a rough voice. "Let him bide." "He is not," one answered. "He had not to slay him. Here be 3 flesh wounds only." Then I began to come to myself, for water was being poured on my face, and I opened my eyes and saw Thrand of Colchester looking at me. My head was on his knee, and he had a helm full of water in his hand. His own head and arm were bandaged, and the man who spoke to him was passing on, seeking elsewhere. All that had happened came back to me in a moment then, and my ears woke to the sounds round me. I knew them only too well, for they were the awesome sounds of the time after battle. "Where is the king?" I said. "Safe enough, they say," Thrand answered. "Is it well with you, master?" I sat up, and the maze passed from me. I had but been stunned by the fall from my horse, and now seemed little the worse, save for sickness and dull weight of weariness. I had been an hour or two thus, as it would seem, for now the Danish host was gone, and only a few men sought for friends on that hillside, as Thrand had sought for me. My horse was dead, slain by the spear thrust that made him rear. It was that one which Earl Wulfnoth gave me when I left him. "I shall be myself again directly," I said. "How has it all ended? I thought I saw you slain." "The Danes are chasing our men towards yon village," he said grimly, pointing towards Hockley. "They will not catch the king, however. They smote me badly enough when I tried to be revenged on Streon, and they slew Guthorm, but they only stunned me." "Go hence before Streon catches you," said I. "Not I," said Thrand. "He knows me not, and I shall wait for another chance. The Danes think me a Mercian, and so I bide with you. Can you fly now, master?" I tried to rise, but I was weak and shaken, and sank down again. I was not fit for walking even yet. "I must wait," I said. "There are stray horses enough down yonder," Thrand said, looking over the meadows below us. "I will go and catch one. We must go soon, or the Danes will be back." "No use," said I, "they are between us and safety. I must wait and take my chance." With that I missed the sword that I loved, for I had thought of selling my life dearly if the Danes would slay me. "Where is sword foe's bane?" I cried. Thrand looked round about me, but could see it not. Then he turned over 1 or 2 of the slain men who lay thickly in the place where our last stand was made. But he could not find it, until a wounded man of ours asked what he sought. Thrand told him. Then I noted how few wounded there were. The sun, night is setting now, broke out and shone athwart the hillside, and it sparkled like the ice heaps on the long banks that a winter's tide has left by the river, for everywhere were the mail-clad slain. But the sparkles were steady, as on the ice, not as on a host that is marching. Ice-cold were those who would need mail no more on Ashington Hill. "The sword is under the horse," the man said groaning. And it was so, and unhurt. "Get me a sword from off the field," I said, "and hide foe's bane somewhere. Then, if they slay me, take it to Egil, Jarl Thorkel's foster brother, and if not, I can find it again. I will not have it taken from me thus." So Thrand took it and its scabbard and hid both under his cloak, and went to where there was a patch of woodland at the foot of the hill, ash and alder growing by the marsh side some 200 yards off. I closed my eyes and waited till he came back, and he was gone for some while. Presently he came, and told me that he had hidden it under a fallen tree trunk, and that the place was dry and safe. He found me another sword easily enough, and it was notched from point to hilt. Its edge was not like that of foe's bane, but the man whose it had been had done his duty with it. It was an English sword. Now I thought that I could walk again, and stood up and made a step or two, painfully enough, in truth, but in such wise that I should soon do better. And then over the brow of the hill the Danes began to come. They had circled round and I had not noted them, and came on us from the other side. They were searching among the slain for their comrades. Half a dozen of them came towards Thran and me, and I supposed that they would have slain me. But my man was ready for them, and took the sword from me quickly. "Will the king suffer us to keep captives?" he said. One answered, in some Jutland speech that was new to me, though one could understand it well enough, "There is word that we are to take any chiefs alive, but that is a new word to us. Who minds it?" "I do," said Thrand. "Here is one who will pay for freedom, and he has yielded to me." "That is luck for you," they said, and passed on. There was plunder enough all around, and they were in haste lest others should come. Thran's Anglian speech was Danish enough for them. "Now you are safe, master," Thran said, "no need for the sword." "I am a captive," said I bitterly. Then my eyes sought the ground as Thran cast the useless blade away, and there, crawling on the reddened turf, was a toad that feared not the still dead, and must seek its food whether men lived or died, unheeding aught but that. And when I saw it, into my mind flashed the time when I had stood, weakened and hurt, and looked at the like in Penhust village, and the words that Spray the smith spoke came to me, and they cheered me, as a little thing will sometimes. And then I thought of her who prayed for me among Penhust woods, and I was glad that life was left me yet. More Danes kept coming now, and presently one who was in some command came to where I sat with Thran standing over me. "Is this a captive?" he asked. "Aye," said Thran. "Who is he?" "Some thane or other." "What shall I do with him?" "Not wants to see all captives. Take him to the fort whence we came." He passed on, and Thran said, "Master, if you can find Egil all may be well, let us go." That was all that I could do. Egil or Godwine might befriend me. Godwine surely would, but I knew not if his word would go for anything. But that was an awesome walk across the upland, where the flower of England lay dead. I knew not what had befallen us fully until I went slowly over Ashington Hill. All the best blood of England was spilt there, and I knew, as we passed the wide ring of heaped corpses where our stand had been longest, that the hopes of Edmund had come to naught, and that the shadow of Strione lay black across his life. We came to the further slope of the hill, and were going down, and through the tears of rage and grief that filled my eyes I saw a few horsemen breasting the slope towards us, and one of them was Edric Strione the traitor himself, and when I saw him I felt as a man who lights suddenly on a viper, and I shuddered, for the sight of him was loathsome to me, and Thran ground his teeth. Strione's eyes fell on us, and he turned his horse to meet us. And when he knew who I was he glowered at me without speaking, and I looked him full in the face once, and then turned my back on him. He did not know my man. "Bind your prisoner," he said sharply to Thran. "No need to do that," said Thran coolly, "he is sorely hurt, and has no arms." Then the other horseman rode up leisurely. "Who is this?" said one, and he was Jarl Eirik. "No one worth having," said Strione, and reined round his horse to go on as if caring not. They went on up the hill. I supposed that they were going there that Edric Strione might say who the slain were. As for us we went our way, and Thran cursed the Earl with every step. We had hardly got away from the hill when men came after us in haste, and before I knew that it was myself whom they sought, they had pushed Thran aside and bound my hands. "What is this?" Thran asked angrily. And I said, "Bind me not. I go to yield myself." "Earl Edric's orders," said the men. We are to keep you here till he comes." At that I knew that I had fallen into his hands, and that my life was not worth much. I could see that Thran knew this also. "That is all very well," I said, "but I am Egil Thorarinson's captive." Whereat one of the men laughed. "You may not choose your captor, man. Egil has not been ashore all day. He is with the ships yonder." Then Thran said, seeming very wroth, "I will not lose a good captive and ransom for any Mercian turncoat. I will go and find the king and make complaint." "Tell him that you are Egil at the same time," a Dane sneered. "You will not hoodwink him as you have this Saxon." "Is not this man Egil?" I asked, looking at Thran with a hope that he would guess whom I needed. "He Egil," they answered, laughing loudly. And at that Thran turned and went away quickly, and I sat down and said, "What will Earl Edric do with me?" One said one thing and one another, and I did not listen much. But they all thought in the end that Edric's lust for gold would make him hold me to heavy ransom. I thought that he loved revenge even better than wealth, and this cheered me not at all. About sunset Edric Strione came. Thran had, I thought, made his escape, most likely, and I was glad. He had helped me all he could. The Earl left the party he was with, and came to me and my guards. He looked at me sidewise for a while, and then spoke to me in broad Wessex, which the Danes could hardly understand, if at all. "So, Master Redwald, what will you give for freedom?" I answered him back in my own Anglian speech, which any Dane knows, for it is but the Danish tongue with a difference of turn of voice, and words here and there. "I will give a traitor nothing. But I am going to hang you," and he chuckled in his evil way. There were many meanings in that laugh of Strione's. "You can do as you like with me, as it happens," I answered, "but I had rather swing at a rope's end as an honest man than sit at Nut's table as Strione the traitor." He tried to laugh, but it stuck in his throat, and so he turned to rage instead. "Smite him," he said to the Danes. "Not we," said the spokesman of the half-dozen. "Settle your own affairs between you. Take him to yon tree and hang him, and have done," said Edric. "Spear me rather," said I in a low voice to the men. They laughed uneasily, but did not move, and Edric again bade them take me to the tree, which was about 100 paces away. They took me there and set me under a great bough, and then stood looking at me and the Earl. They had no rope, and the belts that bound me were of no use for a halter. Edric saw what was needed, and swore. Then he sent one of the men to the ships to get a line of some sort, and I think that his utter hatred of anyone who had seen through his plans made him spare me from spear or sword, for there is no disgrace in death by steel. But at this time there seemed no disgrace in the death he meant me to die, for it was shame to him, not to me. The ships were not so far off. It was not long before 3 or 4 men came through the gathering dusk, and one had a coil of rope over his shoulder. And after them came across the hillside a horseman, beside whom ran a man on foot. There were many men about, and these were too far for me to heed them. I only noticed that which should end my life. "Set to work quickly," said Strione. So they flung the end of the line over the bow, sailor-wise, and made a running bowline in the part that came down. There is torture in that way, and some of the men grumbled thereat, being less hard-hearted. So they began to argue about the matter, and Strione watched my face, for this was pleasure to him, as it seemed, though he did not look straight at me. I wished they would hasten, that was all. Now the horseman and his follower came up, and lo! Egil was the rider, and with him was Thran. Ho, cried Egil, hold hard. That is my man. Strione turned on him with a snarl. Your man, he said. I took him. Hold your peace. There you lie, quoth Thrand. I took him myself for Egil, my master, as your own men know. I told them. He did so, the Danes said, for they loved Egil, and Strione was a stranger of no great reputation, though high in rank. Set him loose, said Egil. I will have no man interfere with my captives. Then Strione hid his anger, and took Egil aside while the Danes and Thrand set me free. Presently Egil broke out into a great laugh. Want you to hang him for slaying men of yours, he cried. Why, he might hang you for the same. How many of his men did you slay this morning? That was in fight, he killed the others in time of peace. Better not say much of that fight, said Egil. There was a peace breaking there. Strione turned pale at that, for he saw that the Danes did not hold his ways in honor, though they had profited by them. Well, then, take him. Little gain will he be to you, for he is landless and ruined, he sneered, chuckling. Well, said Egil, he is a close friend of Earl Wulfnotha's, and maybe it is just as well that you hung him not. Nut would hardly have thanked you for setting that man against him, and maybe bringing Olaf the Norseman down on him also. Strione had thought not of those things. He turned ashy pale at the picture Egil had drawn of loss of Nut's favor. He looked once or twice towards me as if he were trying to frame some excuse, but none would come. I knew it not, he said, falsely enough. I am glad you came. Egil only laughed, and with that Strione rode away quickly, and never looked back as he went. Thereafter Egil took me down to the ships, and he sent Thrand for Swordfoe's bane when the night had fallen. Most kindly did the Dane treat me, but I cared for little. I could not move for stiffness and bruising after I had slept for 12 hours on end, but that was not compared with the sorrow for what had befallen us. 2 days after this the Danish host followed in the track of Edmund and his flying levies, but Egil stayed in command of the ships, and I with him. I had not seen Nut, but Egil had spoken of me to him. I have heard of Redwald of Bears before, the king had said. What know I of him? I think it is somewhat good. He nearly got Emma the Queen out of England, Egil had answered. I know not if you call that a good deed, Lord King. That is it. She spoke to me for him, asking me to treat him well if he fell into my hands, because of his faithful service and long-suffering patience on the journey. Then he asked what he could do, but Egil answered that I would bide with him at this time, and hereafter he would mind the king of me again. Do so, said Nut. He must be a friend of mine. I could not but think well of the young king for this, but it seemed unlikely that friendly towards him I should ever be. Nevertheless, the words of the Witch of Senlac were coming true. Then we, safe in the shelter of the river, waited for news, the 2 kings being in Wessex. But I could not think it likely that Nut would give time for a fresh gathering of Wessex men to Edmund. Nor did he. All men know how the 2 kings met at Olney in the Severn, and how peace was made, after Edmund had said that he would rather fight out the matter hand to the death. Few of us knew then how little able Nut was to fight the mighty Ironside, but we thought him strong in body as in name. Else had that plan never been thought of. They say that Edric Strione advised Nut to take the old Danelaw in Northumbria and leave Edmund the rest of the kingdom, the survivor to succeed to all the land. Maybe he did. If so, it was that he might earn more from Nut by giving him all the land. But it is certain that thus Nut wrought best for himself, for the Danelaw received him gladly, while Wessex loved Edmund. And when Edmund should die, Wessex would take Nut for king at Edmund's word, as it were, by reason of the treaty made and oaths given and received. Not for nothing do men call the king Nut the Wise, for it is certain that he had Edmund in his power, and forbore to use his advantage to the full. So the long struggle ended, and at last there was rest to the land. But I, who had hoped for victory, felt as though life had little pleasure left when first this news came to me. But in a few days came one of Godwine's men bearing messages to me from him, and also from Edmund my king. The first were most kindly, speaking of hope of seeing me ere long, and the like, but it seemed that the young earl had promised Edmund to send me the letter which the messenger brought, and that was the most important business. I took the letter ashore and went to Ashington Hill and sat there among the graves of the slain and read it, while the summer sun and wind and sky were over me, while the land and sea seemed at rest, and all was in a great peace after the strife that I had seen in that place. To my Thane, greeting, what has befallen us, and how we have divided the kingdom with our brother Nut in the old way of the days of Alfred the greatest of our line, you will have heard. We have fought, and all men say that we have fought well, but this is how things have been ordered by the Lord of hosts. Therefore, my Thane, for your sake, and seeing specially that already our brother Nut is well disposed toward you, as Godwine son of Wulfnoth tells us, by reason of your service to Emma the Queen, I would bid you accept him as ruler of East Anglia, where your place is. And you shall hold this letter in proof that thus our word to you is, if in days to come the line of Wessex kings shall hold the kingdom once more. Few have been those who have been faithful to us as have you. Now, I will set down no more, for Edmund my king wrote to me as he was wont to speak in the days that were gone, and I wept as I read his words, wept bitterly there on Ashington Hill, and I am not ashamed thereof. And when I had spelt out to the end of his letter, there were words also that were pleasant to me. For they were written by Elfric the abbot, my friend, thus. Written by the hand of Elfric, abbot of St. Peter's Minster at Needhamstead. I, Elfric, bid you, my son Redwald, be of cheer, for in the end all shall be for the best. Bide in your home of bears if not wills, as I think shall be, and see to the good of your own people as would your father who is gone. There is an end of war for England. It remains for us to make for the things of peace. Then I sat and thought for long, and at last it seemed to me that I could do naught but as both king and friend would bid me, and the words that Elfric had written weighed more with me than those of the king. Now that I could fight no more, I began to long to get back to that home life in the old place that had seemed so near to me and had been taken away. And then came the thought of Aldra, and of what she would say of this. But as things were, and with this letter before me, I could not doubt what her word would be. She would speak as Elfric wrote. Then I longed for Olaf and his counsel. But he was far beyond my reach, nor could I tell where he might be. He had gone across the grey rim of the sea, and no track was there for me to follow. The evening fell, and still I sat there, and Thran of Colchester came to seek me. I know not what he feared for me if I grew lonely on Ashington Hill now that all seemed lost. Master, come back to the ships, he said. It is ill biding here after sunset. The slain are unquiet by reason of Streon's deeds. They will not harm me, Thrand, I answered. I would I lay here with them even now, but that is past. I rose up and went down the hill with him, and the sun set behind it, and it was grey and black against the red evening sky. There was a mist from the river, and one might think that one saw many things moving therein. And I know not that I saw anything more than mortal, though maybe I did, until as we went to Nut's Dune, under which Egil's ship lay, and we passed that place where the left wing of our line had been driven back on the marsh. Then I saw an armed man coming towards us, and Thrand, who walked at my shoulder, closed up to me, for the warrior had a drawn sword in his hand. And when we came face to face, I knew that I looked once more on Ulfketel our earl, and a great fear fell on me, for he lay with his men in the mound where he fell, and Egil and I had raised it over him. Then I must speak. Greeting to the earl, I said, and my voice sounded strange. But he made no answer, save that he looked me in the face and smiled at me gravely and sweetly, and sheathed the sword he held, folding his arms thereafter as one whose work is done. And while one might count a score, I saw him, plainly as in life, and then he was gone.